Happy fall, everyone. Now is the time of year where our crops are coming to an end. We have to clear them out and start preparing the land for the next growing season. Additionally, now that the trees and shrubs are going dormant, it's a good time to prune everything, transplant what you can, and just kind of maintain a weed-free environment before the weeds come back in full force next year. Stick around and watch what we do for our seasonal chores. So when we were preparing for the growing season, I took the end of one of our beds that kind of had a low spot in it and I filled it with mulch. My plan was to just cover up the mulch and let it break down for the next growing season in hopes of kind of increasing the height of the garden bed. But Angie actually needed some room for some viney things like melons and sweet potatoes. So you can see here what our sweet potato yielded. And we got some huge potatoes in there. We were able to use these to make some Thanksgiving dishes, such as baked sweet potatoes and sweet potato pie. We waited till the first frost of the year to harvest the sweet potatoes, but the frost wasn't actually too bad and it didn't kill some of our pepper plants. So as you can see here, I was able to do one final harvest, get it in the fridge before the big freezes started to come. Hi everyone, winter is approaching and we're having some freezing conditions in the forecast. To help protect our irrigation system, I need to uncork or open up the valves at the end of our irrigation lines to make sure they don't freeze. All right, here's the one at the end of our greenhouse. All right, the third and final one is over at our Three Sisters garden. This one doesn't have a ball valve to release the water, but we did use the removable hand-tightened fittings. So I'm just going to unscrew one of the T-fittings and pull the pipe apart. I do have a 90-degree valve here to turn off the water to the outside. And I'll go ahead and unplug my irrigation controller for the year as well. Here's our manifold system. I can turn off the water here if I need to service the outside, but I've already turned it off on the inside. So right now I'm just going to drain the filter. Let that pour out for a few seconds. Now I can actually unscrew this entire system from the wall. I basically built this as a modular unit where I can remove the whole system from the wall if I need to. So now that our Three Sisters experimental garden is done for the year, I'm pulling out all the corn. It did offer a pretty good privacy screen, but now a lot of the corns are kind of breaking under their own weight. So I'm basically just pulling these straight out of the ground to pull the root balls out, which isn't really a big deal because we don't have any plastic with holes in it to damage. Basically just pulling out the compost that we had laid that's stuck in the roots. I have to move all this out of the way to then get to start raking the old cucumber plants and squash plants away. And as you can see here, one of the later growing pumpkins of the year started to grow up our fence, and it's still green. We actually have to get this off because we like to put Christmas lights along the top of our fence, and I don't want to risk cutting the Christmas light cord later on if we were to hold out on pruning these vegetable plants. We do have one strip of landscape fabric down where the cucumbers were, and then there's just an old tarp folded in half to try to keep the weeds out of that area as well. I have to pull both of these up, and any metal staples that I find, I need to get those out of the way so they don't interfere with the lawnmower. Also, I have to pull the irrigation lines out that are under these tarps. Unfortunately, we have some pretty tenacious grasses down here in the south, and no matter how hard I try to keep the garden bed well edged, the grass is going to grow up and kind of take over the garden beds, and I can't mow it because the landscape fabric will get sucked up into the mower blades and it'll start to fray the edges. So I basically just let the grasses grow, and occasionally I'll take a handful of it and chop it off with some hand pruners. But this is my only time of year where I can roll the tarps up, mow the edges without interfering with the vegetables. This is probably the most annoying area of the whole garden. This was an experimental thing we did with the tomatoes. The trellises worked great once we decided on a string that actually could withstand the elements. The tomatoes easily climbed up to the top. We had maybe 15-foot plants, the longest ones. They went all the way up to the top of the bamboo, and then I let them go all the way back down to the ground. But since we didn't use landscape fabric, these weeds just took over. And just like the other spots I was talking about, I can't really weed comfortably without the risk of damaging the tomatoes' roots. Some of these weeds have a much bigger root stock than the tomatoes do, and if I pull it up, it might pull the tomatoes out of the ground. So this is my only chance of the year to do this. Maybe we can figure out a better way of handling tomatoes next growing season. I basically wanted to pull out each of the tomato plants by the roots and try to get back all of the tomato clips that were on the plant. Otherwise, these clips would just end up in the compost, and I don't really want plastic in there. And it's kind of a money-saving technique to be able to use these clips again. But I had to get all those weeds out of the way to get the ladder in there to remove the bamboo trellis structure that you can see me doing here. And now finally I get to pull out all of the pepper plants. I just pulled the roots straight out, and I had to stretch the holes we had in the landscape fabric just a bit, but the root structure on these peppers isn't too big. So I was able to fill up one wheelbarrow load with all of the pepper plants. This is really just the start of preparing for the next season. Make sure you like and subscribe, and you'll get to see more. Thanks.